For Thank you, Liz, for that introduction. And we're very pleased to be here to present about our Smoke, Air, Fire, and Energy, or SAFE project. And I'd like to start by inviting other folks on the SAFE project to briefly introduce themselves. I'll be doing a lot of the talking during our presentation. My name is Peter Alstone. I'm a researcher at the Schatz Energy Research Center at Cal Poly Humboldt. We were collaborating with the Karuk tribe and also the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe in this research. So we had three groups of researchers, and I'll invite all my fellow researchers from all those groups to briefly introduce yourselves now, and then we'll kick off this presentation. I'll start with Tanya in the room.
Hi, my name is Tanya Garcia. Hi, Heidi. I'm a research engineer at the Schatz Energy Research Center, and I'm a project manager, and I manage the SAFE project. Yes.
Great.
Thank you for being here today.
Over to Deepti, and then Heidi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deepti Chatty, and I'm faculty at UC San Diego in the Urban Studies and Planning Department and in the Critical Gender Studies program. Formerly, I was at Cal Poly Humboldt, and I'm one of the co-PIs on the SAFE project. I'm the social science lead for the project, and I'm really excited to be here and share our work with all of you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Heidi Moore-Gwinnett, she, her pronouns. I am the Director of Tribal and Government Affairs with Blue Lake Rancheria. And I had the privilege of coming on board about halfway into the planning process and assisted with some of the discrete logistics and some of the facilitation. It was a great project to be a part of.
Thanks, Heidi. And do we have anybody else online? There's a few more people I know that were invited, but I'm not sure if they could make it. So please do chime in if you're a SAFE project contributor. Okay. Let's get this going. And we are so thankful to have a big crowd of y'all here today from many different agencies. Some of you I've met before, and others, this is our first meeting. So really pleased to have you all here. So I want to start by giving credit to Deepti for coming up with such an excellent acronym for our project: Smoke, Air, Fire, Energy, SAFE in rural California. That is what we were focused on, looking for energy and air quality infrastructure improvements for climate smart communities who are really facing these intersecting challenges that are encompassed in that acronym of SAFE. So the co-PI team include myself, Deepti Chatty, Tesfa Johannes Jakob, who's also at Cal Poly Humboldt, Jana Gagnon at Blue Lake Rancheria, who's now moved on and is with the California Governor's Office, and Sean Bork at the Karuk Tribe Department of Natural Resources. And at the end, I've got recognitions for many other team members who really played important roles on this project. So the goal of our project was to really look at this hard question. Given these intertwined, increasing risks of climate change and fire, how can we accelerate progress towards tribal community-defined needs for energy and air quality infrastructure in rural California? So instead of asking communities to prove what their needs were, we started with needs and looked for ways to accelerate progress. And that was a really important choice that we made as a research team and set a foundation, I think, for how our project was able to be successful. We wove together strands of community-based research, infrastructure planning and design, and action, taking action towards deployment. I want to pass it to Tanya, who's going to describe a bit about the way our research team brought together strengths in these three different groups.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so as we mentioned, the three partners in the project were the Schatz Energy Research Center, the Karuk Department of Natural Resources, and the Blue Lake Rancheria. Each has their own strengths and specialties. The Schatz Center focuses on energy systems, air pollution, sustainability. We've had some experience working on the construction of microgrids with the Blue Lake Rancheria. They are a clean energy leader in the area, as well as disaster response. And the Karuk tribe, who has a lot of experience with land management and renewing indigenous cultural practices, like bringing fire back to the land. So having conversations before this, and as Peter mentioned, the priority and importance of community-based research, working together to identify the needs and priorities of what the community needs, and then shaping the research questions and the type of work we were going to do based off of that. And so you can see on the map that Cal Poly Humboldt is on the coast. Blue Lake Rancheria is probably 20 minutes away from where we are, and the Karuk Tribal Aboriginal Territory spans a large area. We focused a lot in the community of Orleans, which is where the Karuk Department of Natural Resources is located. And so we did a lot of work and research in that area. Yeah, and I'd like to pass it off to Deepti Chatti, or is there one more?
Oh, there's a slide in between there.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
So,
I changed the presentation
you did
around.
change the presentation.
So I wanted to set up what were the research goals and what were the goals that we pursued as a team, bringing together the different expertise of those team members. So one of the research questions or goal areas was related to engineering design. We wanted to identify the kind of engineering design management features for clean energy microgrids that are resilient to wildfire risk and serving needs across many scales. Blue Lake Rancheria is already a leader in microgrid deployment, and we were looking for ways of both shrinking and growing the scale of microgrids through this project. We also looked at air quality and the role of low-cost air sensing networks and indoor air filtration systems to support better health in rural communities, especially those who are facing extreme wildfire smoke inundation. And through this, knew that it was important to really start with an understanding of people's experiences and their understandings of smoke, air, fire, and energy, so that the approaches that we propose are going to be consistent with community needs and also supporting climate goals and sustainable landscape management. And sort of an undergirding or a foundational question was, at least especially for us in the sort of academic university world, how can we do better at having research partnerships between universities and the communities in which we're embedded, so that we're not just making one-off reports and assessments, but are more of a long-term sustained collaboration towards shared goals of climate smart infrastructure, and particularly infrastructures that are serving indigenous communities. So now I do want to pass it to Deepti to speak a bit to that portion of the project that is really foundational to the work that we did.
Thanks, Peter. And Tanya touched upon some of these in her slide as well. And so I wanted to just foreground the fact that from the very beginning, it was really important to us that we centered not only the needs of our Indigenous collaborators, but also the expertise and knowledge that they actively hold and practice on all of these topics that this project was about. And so, from the beginning, the way the project was structured was a very flat intellectual hierarchy. We had co-principal investigators both within the university and also at the Karuk tribe and at the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe. It's important for us to, at the outset, state that settler colonialism has not only dispossessed Indigenous communities of their land, but has also devalued their knowledge of environmental management. And so our project began with that premise and with the idea that in this project, we would be doing the opposite. We would be foregrounding the knowledge that Blue Lake Rancheria and the Karuk tribe have to actively manage their landscapes and health. And so, as the slide says, we were working to subvert these dynamics, both in the priorities of our science and in the ways of doing our research itself. And we wanted to develop a long-term, meaningful partnership between energy and air pollution researchers, and innovators in the communities where this project was being unfolded. It's also important to foreground at the outset that Not only have Indigenous communities faced really poor and tenuous access to clean energy, and they're often not the beneficiaries of new technologies and new improvements today. And so it was important to us to correct that. And so rather than thinking about innovating new energy technologies and air pollution in urban, non-native spaces, we wanted to bring some of that innovation to rural, remote, tribal areas in California. I'm going to turn it back over to Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Deepti. So one of the communities where we had a significant focus was Panamnik, now called Orleans, California, still called Panamnik. But we started with community needs, and this slide shows a photo of the landscape. You can see some wisps of smoke in this photo. It's from a cultural fire that's being burned for particular cultural reasons, and a very beautiful day there by the Klamath River and the sort of the valley in and around Orleans. Some of the climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience needs are listed here on the left. A lot of these were known before we wrote the proposal for the SAFE project, and others were clarified or sort of surfaced through our work. So it's long been known that there's need for better use, support for good fire to keep forests intact and also reduce catastrophic wildfire in this region. That's a foundational piece of the infrastructure work that we were looking at. What would infrastructure that's consistent with using good fire on the landscape look like? That was one of our questions. Also, a need to support better electricity reliability so people can adopt electric vehicles, and more capacity for clean energy in the community. An adaptation need is air filtration to cope with extreme and frequent wildfire smoke that is very common in this region. So smoke that would make this picture impossible and does happen quite frequently. And then resilience, so energy systems that stay online through wildfire stress, through winter storms, through earthquakes. So some of those are climate related and others are non-climate related stresses. Or at least so far, we don't know of any link, I think, between earthquakes and climate change. I want to start by talking a bit about the air sensor networks that we deployed in collaboration with partners and how those, so here's a picture of them. We deployed low-cost sensors. They're purple air sensors. I'd actually love to get a sense of this group. This is always interesting. Who used the purple air sensor network in the last year to check air quality somewhere? You could raise your virtual hand if you've done that. It would be cool to know just how far the reach is of these sensors. Awesome. So you can definitely check it out sometime if you haven't already. Purpleair.com is one way to look at it, but the EPA is also including these data sets into their own networks now. This map actually shows two different kinds of air sensors. The round circles are official EPA monitoring sites for air quality, and the small squares are low-cost air sensors. What you'll see is in our project area, we didn't have any official regulatory monitors, which means that when the Karuk tribe and others in the region were looking for air quality permits to do fire, a lot of the air permits were based on weather on the coast or weather far away and weren't really related to the weather right where we were. So part of putting in the low-cost air sensors is just surfacing this data and making it more available. You can see that there's a significant difference between the air quality in the project locations that are now covered by low-cost sensors and the surrounding area. So the dots here are showing extreme days, and extreme days are really a driver for the need to invest in air filtration that would protect people's health. I guess for reference, these purple air sensors cost about $200, maybe $300 now. Inflation is happening, but that's in comparison to tens of thousands of dollars for one of the regulatory monitors. So these play a really important role in filling in gaps in that regulatory network. What we were able to see with our air sensors and also with our eyes through this project period was, one, the impacts of wildfire smoke in the region. So this is showing a day in fall of 2021, which was right during our SAFE project effort. Wildfire smoke was quite literally descending into the town of Orleans on the morning when this photo was taken. And the graph on the right shows the low-cost sensor readings and how wildfire smoke was persistent and often in very extreme hazardous levels within the community. And that was a long-term inundation of smoke. It's something that is actually quite common in the community. Katrina, I see your hand is up, and maybe it's still up from using purple air, but maybe you have a question. No. Okay. I'll move on.
Hey,
Peter,
I
Katrina
did have
has
a
in
question.
the chat. Sorry.
I was
Oh,
trying.
yeah,
I was
sure.
trying to add it, Peter. The low cost air sensors. I just had a question about if we have any data on the consistency with the low cost air sensors as compared to the official air sensors in the other spaces, and if the low cost air sensors are able to provide the same type of data necessary for justification for projects and other things, or if it's really also a gap that needs to be, we need to deploy some more higher cost air sensors to support.
That's a great question. The low-cost air sensors measure the same thing, but they are not as accurate and precise as the federal reference grade monitors that are used to do regulatory action. The South Coast Air Quality Management District has actually a really great website on testing low-cost air sensors against regulatory monitors. The purple air do very well. But they're not as good as the tens of thousands of dollar sensor that would be a regulatory monitor. For the purposes of what this community needs, though, in terms of making decisions about should school children be, careful playing outdoors, should our community be deploying air filters or encouraging elders to take shelter, the low-cost air sensors are fine. They are very good for telling the difference between good and bad air days. So if we needed to tell, down to the 5% level of precision, we would need to have a higher cost, higher precision monitor. But for the kinds of decisions that community members are making, the low-cost sensors are all just fine for making those kinds of decisions, which is why they were the focus in our study. So we really see them as they're serving two different purposes, versus regulatory compliance versus community-based, situational intelligence. Right. So wildfire smoke, big problem, and I think that's not a major headline anymore, at least in California. This is anyway. I'll move on. The Karuk tribe is also very active in training others and establishing best practices for using prescribed fire through the Klamath Trex program. And this is one of several Trex programs or prescribed fire training exchanges that happen all through the state and the country. Targeted air quality monitoring that we did with the SAFE project identified how prescribed fires like the one shown here, and this happened about a month after the wildfire smoke episode that I showed on the previous slide, how prescribed fire have relatively low smoke impacts in comparison. So the graph here was that you can see the prescribed fire unit on the left. We had our air sensor strapped to a tree with a solar panel to provide right next to the fire air quality. And over the course of the week, there certainly were smoke impacts, but much less than the wildfires that caused inundation and significant health concerns. And the other kind of good fire on the landscape is cultural fire. So this is different from prescribed fire, where you could think of prescribed fire as a landscape management tool that's focused on goals that are at the landscape scale. Cultural fire is very situational. Basket weavers and other cultural practitioners can guide the use of fire for specific goals, aligning with cultural, ecological, and other community priorities. These are often aligned with multi-benefit priorities. So that the same fires that create good basket materials are also creating good habitat and are also protecting the community from wildfire risk. So we're able to also show using similar low-cost air sensors deployed strategically around the cultural fires, how those cultural fires also don't have significant smoke impacts compared to wildfire. This is one of the community concerns about the use of good fire, is that people are justifiably very sensitive to introducing smoke into the air because of their history of experiencing wildfire smoke inundation. The air sensors are able to provide some comfort about the levels of smoke and the way that practitioners using prescribed and cultural fire are able to control when and where the smoke happens from these fires.
Hey, Peter, good question in the chat.
Oh, thank you for monitoring the chat, because I am not there. Yeah, what's up in the chat?
Cultural burns versus prescribed burns, and what are the differences and benefits?
Sure. That's great. So yeah, so somebody asked, do prescribed burns have the same goals as cultural fires? What's the difference? As somebody, I'm not a fire practitioner myself, but I got to meet a lot of folks who are through this project. The way I understand it is that you could think of prescribed fire as one of the tools that we might use to broadly support ecosystem health, do forest thinning projects. It's a landscape scale application of fire in the best case, although landscape scale is a bit ambitious for the amount of fire that's allowed to be on the landscape right now. But in any case, the prescribed fire is usually more like a forest manager driven activity, where cultural fire is related to a whole range of cultural priorities that could be related to food or baskets or spiritual practice. So think of cultural fire as more connected to other cultural practices that are not sort of necessarily the same as just because you're wanting to manage the landscape or reduce wildfire risk.
Yeah, and I think in the picture you have here on the left, right, like they're burning some willow,
Yeah.
right? And that helps with the eradication of insects and pests, as well as making it a more malleable material for basket weaving and things like that.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah. And we were able to go, this is a site that people visit all the time. And about a year later, I was back on the site where this fire was. And indeed, there are many nice young willow shoots ready to be harvested and put into basket materials. So it works. Anybody else from the SAFE project want to add to that?
Peter, I just put in the chat that one way to think about it is that both are intentional, but they have different purposes. And I think it can be confusing because they're both intentional and then but they don't serve the same function. I think one of the ways in which we in our project learned about the importance of cultural burns was that it's always led with a cultural goal in mind. So you need that cultural expertise to be driving that process. And that cultural goal in mind, as Peter and Tanya were telling us, could be related to food, it could be related to fiber, it could be related to ecological management as well. But the prescribed fire does not come with that goal in mind. It comes solely from that sort of landscape, biomass reduction framework in mind. So I'll just stop there and turn it back over to you, Peter.
Well stated, Deepti. Okay, so suffice to say, all three fire types that we talked about here do introduce smoke. And the most concerning of those is wildfire smoke, both due to the scale of the smoke that's there and its uncontrolled nature. So one of the things that we also studied in this project was the role of high performance air filtration systems to dramatically improve indoor air. We were looking for dramatic improvements because of the significant levels of wildfire smoke. So through our project, we deployed air filtrations like this one. This is a high performance HEPA air filtration system shown on the right. We found the best ones that we could find on the market to deploy because the people who live in Orleans are facing the highest levels of wildfire smoke of essentially anybody in the country in any given year. This is a high performance filter. It's got a very cool feature, which is a built-in particulate matter sensor, even lower cost than the low cost purple air sensor, but again, good enough to tell, is it smoky? Should the air filter turn up or can I turn back down? So kind of think of it like the thermostat in your house that keeps the temperature comfortable. This would keep the air clean. And they work. We measured the air quality outdoors and also indoors in the homes that were using these air filtration systems. The graph shows a time series of significant and extreme outdoor air quality and the indoor air quality in both the main room and the bedroom for a home that has high performance air filtration. So there is still elevated smoke level indoors, but it's within levels that are much lower and are able to be tolerated by people better. And the table here shows the number of hours that the outdoor conditions were above certain levels. And these are significant levels in terms of the air quality index that the EPA has defined, and how indoors the number of hours spent above those levels was significantly lower for people in the study. So this is kind of what the sensors tell us, but we also wanted to hear directly from people about how this worked out for them. And the orange box here summarizes really the bottom line of what we heard from people who were able to use these high quality air filters. There were dramatic improvements in air quality and quality of life. Many participants, and we only had 9 households in this small little study that we did as part of the SAFE project. Multiple households conveyed that there were family members previously experiencing chronic breathing related health issues, and they had significant reductions in symptoms. Like, my kid used to miss school for asthma a lot, and oh yeah, now that we have this air filter, they actually didn't miss any school days this year due to asthma. Or people who conveyed that their spouse had chronic bronchitis year after year, and when the air filter was there, they weren't experiencing those symptoms. This is not the same as a randomized control trial, but it is very good evidence of, in combination with the air sensors, that this could be a really critical tool for climate adaptation and reducing health burden in rural communities.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat related to this slide as well about something that we saw was that different houses have different levels of what we call like tightness, or like some might have some windows that are very leaky or loose, some just they have more infiltration from the smoke. So we didn't necessarily go into studying that, but we did have some recommendations. Like, I know I had leaky windows and I put duct tape when the wildfire was really bad along windows. Maybe you have something to add to that, Peter.
Yeah, and that's a great question. You know, that yeah, some people have leaky houses. Actually, the picture here is showing our engineering model of the world, and how to think about this is that the way that smoke gets into your house is partly through outside air infiltration. It could also be through your HVAC system. If you have an HVAC system that involves outdoor air, that's not common in homes, but it is in commercial buildings. And there's 2 places filters can go. You know, one would be in your HVAC system, and another is an in-room filter like the one that we showed. So certainly if you have a bigger house or if you have more infiltration, you do need more of a filter. We looked at a whole range of parameters and did some modeling, and found that the kind of standard air filtration recommendation that we might make is between 0.5 and 1 cubic feet per minute of clean air delivered per square foot of building area. So if you have 1,000 square foot home, you'd want to have an air filtration system between 500 and 1,000 cubic feet per minute, and which may actually be multiple air filtration systems.
Yeah, and there was a question in the chat as well about were folks in the study having to keep their doors and windows closed and how people dealt with cooling.
Yeah.
And so we heard from people that during these wildfire events, they maintain all the doors and windows closed, even when it's hot. And a lot of folks have air conditioning, or they might have like the box ones that go in the windows. So that could be another way that particulate matter is entering the home. However, a lot of times when there's wildfires, there's also power outages. So if there's a power outage, then you can't use the air purifier and you can't use your AC. So maybe you do have to open your window or your door and be exposed to that particulate matter and smoke. But we heard from a lot of these folks that that's already their go-to procedure of like locking down. We
Yeah.
don't go outside. And also we didn't mention that we gave folks 2 different size purifiers. So the one that Peter showed in the picture was a very large purifier that that households maintain in their like living room or larger area. And we also provided a more medium-sized air purifier for their bedrooms that they could move around room to room.
Yeah.
So just addressing those questions.
Yeah. And there's, to Katrina's question, there were wildfire events there are wildfires in the proximity of
A
this
lot.
area every year, and I forget the name of them in 2021. It may have been the Red Salmon Complex, but that may have been the year before. In any case, it's something that you can kind of count on, is that there's going to be wildfire somewhere in the region.
The Lassen fire.
Yeah, or was that the Dixie Fire year?
Dixie,
Yeah. Okay. Another way to look at this too, and just one last note on our air filtration before we pivot over to energy, which Tanya really queued up there. Like if we don't have reliable energy, none of these air filters work. You could think of these air filtration systems as very cost-effective prophylactic medicine for breathing-related health. They are expensive, and this is a significant cost particularly for homes where people may not have a lot of income, but the cost is $500 to $2,000. If you're going to follow the recommendation that we had to really keep the air clean in a home, depending on the size of the home and your leakiness, it may be $500 to $2,000 up front, and another $50 to $300 a year in filter replacements. But if you look at what the average cost is for therapy of asthma or COPD, it's in the thousands of dollars per year per person. So this is a very cost-effective way of supporting people's health looked at in that lens. And that's, of course, not the only reason to do it, but that could be a reason to think about the way that public health funding is directed, and that this is a worthy goal. So I'd like to pass over to Heidi to speak a little bit about Blue Lake Rancheria, and who are leaders in clean energy, and pivoting to the kind of energy infrastructure section of our presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. As you can see by this picture, in the center, you'll see some of our economic enterprises. The building with the 2 red stripes is our hotel. The building in front of what appears to be a reservoir, that's a little lower in scale, is the full-scale casino, and the white balloon-like structure is an event space. Then you can see to the right of that some parking and overflow parking, and if you were to continue to see the picture, kind of wrapping around, you would see a 2-story tribal government office. You'll also see in this picture a solar array, and that is associated with our comprehensive microgrid. And just because I can't help but point it out, and it's just such a awful yet very compelling imagery and analogy, is that the city of Blue Lake sewage ponds are located directly in the center of this pristine property. The reason why I kind of did a little road show here on the property is to show its proximity to the mountain range that you see above. That mountain range, we're at the base, we're in the valley about 13 miles east of the coast. And we're at the valley right before you head up 299 into those significantly wildfire impacted areas, as well as areas that are significantly impacted by unreliable access to the grid. Specific for us in Blue Lake as a rancheria, we were really invested in expanding our clean energy systems, as well as because we're one of the corridors into Humboldt County, connecting I-5 to the 101. A lot of trucking and shipping that happens along with recreation. We wanted to be able to implement and support significant EV charging infrastructure. We also wanted to make sure that whatever we do in the area of energy sovereignty, that there's intertribal collaboration and opportunities for knowledge share between our tribal nation and our neighbors. With that, there's adaptation needs. So there are specific skills that folks need to be trained in to be able to support such infrastructure. So the theme there is around workforce development programs to train and support a climate workforce. So whether that's around public utilities, whether that's around microgrid, O&M and implementation, whether that's around broadband implementation, all of those things are happening with Blue Lake Rancheria as part of the solution. We also wanted to lead efforts and support efforts along with SHOTS to deploy air filtration systems and those air quality monitors, the purple air quality monitors for smoke episodes on the coast. And what we did specifically with the purple air sensor monitors is we've deployed them to almost every school within the 31 school districts across the county. And it serves as, again, Peter indicated, a decision lever, if you will, for determining whether or not students, one, should come to school, and two, once at school, if they should engage in outdoor activity. The third theme was around resilience needs. We are well known for many reasons. One, because we have this redundant, reliable alternative to the grid in our microgrid system. So you'll see another picture later that kind of really illustrates the why we've done what we've done and how that can support the broader community. You'll notice also in this picture, if you look at that front parking lot, there's a building that looks like it's half red and half white. That is a convenience store and gas station. And so in times of limited or no access to the grid, such as the December 20th, 2022 6.4 earthquake, people really want and need access to fuel to get their generators going, to keep their food supplies safe, to keep their homes warm. And, you know, it's just a nature of the beast. We also see that people want to have a full tank of gas in their vehicles. And so we, for some of these reasons and more, we also have a 250,000 gallon overflow water storage tank that fire departments can fill up. Because of our vast parking opportunities, we're often a staging area for CAL FIRE and others that are going up to 299 to support those very rural, indigenous and other communities when they're inundated with wildfire. We have open land where helicopters can land. And again, because of what you see in the center with that white balloon and the hotel and the casino. And then Peter's gonna bring us along the berm here of 299 where there's some open area. We're going to be installing, building a TOMA resilience campus that's 16,000 square feet. And a little in front of that, a health clinic that's 5,000 square feet. And so we are experts out of necessity in emergency response and being a resiliency hub for our local community and our broader region. So it's for those reasons and our commitment to climate justice and disrupting the climate crisis that we were happy to be strategic partners with SHOTS and the CRUC on this most important effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. So I think it's clear, Blue Lake Rancheria brings a lot of expertise across multiple areas, and really pertinent for the SAFE project was the energy expertise. So our electricity system is stressed by fire risk, and there's a significant need to decarbonize to mitigate climate change. So we kind of have lots of push and pull on the energy system right now. That is true on the coast. It's even more true up in upriver areas where the grid is very tenuously connected through extreme wildfire threat zones. As Heidi mentioned, part of the use of the Blue Lake Rancheria's facilities is to provide resilience. This is actually a photo showing the long line of cars that is waiting to get fuel and ice from that fueling station that's powered by a microgrid. This was, I believe this one was during the public safety power shutoff. So this was a time when the electric wires were de-energized to reduce the risk of wildfire. Microgrids like this one allow critical facilities like a fueling station or even a whole community to stay online. So both this fueling station microgrid and the community microgrid at Blue Lake Rancheria were EPIC funded projects by the California Energy Commission, really important strategic investments by the state in R&D to build up this technology that now we really do need to deploy at scale, because there's such a need across the state, and especially in places like Orleans, where the power goes out dozens of times a year. It's far away, and when you take distribution lines out of service, helicopters and trucks have to go inspect the lines before they're brought back into service. So even a momentary outage could turn into 4 or 8 hours of power outage. That could be avoided with microgrids. And so part of the goal of the SAFE project was figuring out how to take the learning at Blue Lake Rancheria and scale it to the need at the landscape scale in communities in the Karuk area. Let's see. So it's often said a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that is certainly true in this case as well. Another kind of resilience need is earthquakes. In December of 2022, we had a pretty significant earthquake here in Humboldt County. It knocked out power locally. And this shows how the Blue Lake Rancheria became an island of light within the darkness of night. Normally in the background of this photo would be the lit up town of Blue Lake beyond Blue Lake Rancheria, but on this particular night during the earthquake, only the Blue Lake Rancheria stayed online. So our work through the SAFE project was helping to strategically make partnerships to build on this expertise and to bring it to other communities. So that took many different forms, and I just want to get to the most recent, very interesting effort that we've been able to work on together. This came from the SAFE project, but also from other work that other collaborators in our region have been working on. And right now, we are anxiously waiting from the Department of Energy to hear about proposed funding for the TERRAS project, the Tribal Energy Resilience and Sovereignty Project. We are, like I said, we've applied for funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. We were very thankful and lucky to have support in developing that proposal from the California Energy Commission, from Pacific Gas and Electric Company, and from other strategic partners. This project would build microgrids, but a lot of other things too. It would build the workforce. Happy May Day, everybody. It would also build collaboration, build resilience, and build sovereignty in the region. So the partners on this include the Blue Lake Rancheria, the Karuk tribe, also the Hupa Valley and the Yurok tribes. The Hupa Valley, the Yurok tribe, and the Karuk tribe are all neighbors and all live within the Klamath Basin on different parts of the Klamath River and the Trinity River. And these set of photos and also this diagram shows this very ambitious microgrid project that we are proposing. That would be approximately a $200 million project, all in, to develop community microgrids serving the Hoopa Valley, along with the upriver part of the Yurok Reservation and the community of Orleans, Karuk community. Doing this would avoid the need, or at least delay the need, for significant investment in undergrounding the 150 miles of transmission and distribution lines that would otherwise be required to provide reliable, resilient electricity to these communities. So 200 million sounds like a high number unless you compare it to the 600 to a billion in the conventional approach of hardening. So that would be ratepayer funds of 600 million to $1 billion versus a microgrid project that has some strategic ratepayer funded investments and then many tribally owned investments. That $200 million project would include tribally owned and operated microgrids that are revenue generating systems that can support their operations and maintenance and also support other tribal goals. So we think that this is another win-win situation in terms of strategic investments in tribal communities that help to support climate mitigation and adaptation and resilience, and can help to reduce the cost of adapting to wildfire risk in the state. So overall, we looked at lots of different pathways. This is to summarize what we looked at and what we found. We saw, there's a need for microgrids to serve the needs in whole communities. Microgrids really can roll together climate mitigation through deployment of renewable energy, adaptation, and resilience. And also, microgrids would support grid management strategies that reduce wildfire risk. So it would make it more possible to de-energize lines in order to reduce the risk. One thing that we identified, and this was very clear, is that it's important to cover the whole community and not just critical facilities. When the power is going to go out a dozen times in a month, it can't just be the fire station that has power. It needs to also be everybody's home and the school and the office buildings and everything else that's important for community life. In addition to ubiquitous, resilient energy, there's a need for widespread indoor air filtration across the community. And the sizing of that would be right sized for wildfire smoke inundation. So really the wildfire smoke would be the driver for how big the air filters need to be that you'd invest in. But those same air filters can also be used to cope with less intense smoke from prescribed fire or cultural fire. And we see that, again, every occupied building has a need. We talked with people in the community about the idea of wildfire smoke shelters or clean air spaces. And the broad consensus was that's not useful because I can't just drop my life and go sit in a gymnasium every time there's wildfire smoke. I would be spending weeks at a time there and I have other things I have to do. And so similar to the fact that we put roofs over our houses to keep the rain out, we have air conditioners to keep buildings at a comfortable temperature. In places where wildfire smoke is sort of part of the weather, air filtration systems can be thought of as just part of a normal building in terms of the way it should be operated to provide people's health and safety. And finally, there's a need for more air quality sensors to inform the management of land with fire and also of our buildings and air filtration. So we see expanded need for those. Many of the themes that we've talked about today, we were very lucky to get to present and discuss with some of you who are here on the Zoom and many others who are not at the SAFE Symposium that was hosted at Blue Lake Rancheria on March 1st, 2023. We had 200 attendees, including representatives from tribal governments, state agencies, federal officials, students, members of the public, and a whole day of interactive discussions and sessions that touched on our research outcomes, but were very generative and generated new ideas. So you can see here a photo of Deepti moderating a panel about living with fire and smoke that brought together a range of practitioners and academics to really engage with each other. So this was a very fun and cool event. If we get the chance, we would love to have another SAFE symposium. And so one of the things that we were asked to do in this presentation is to summarize how we identified community needs in this project and how we were following through on those. So this table summarizes overall what were the needs that we identified and what do we do about it with the SAFE project and with follow-on work. So in terms of air filtration as a need to maintain clean air, we were able to obtain grant funding through philanthropy, the CA100 project, to provide 200 households and community facilities with high-performance air filters, working with the Karuk Tribe Health and Human Services Program. Those have already been deployed, and we have a study ongoing to understand just how effective they've been in those households. Air sensors to provide higher density of situational awareness was another identified priority. And again, we obtained community funding for community air monitoring through the US EPA. We're working right now to expand the air sensor network throughout the Mid-Klamath region and using watersheds as an organizing principle. So we're working within the Klamath and the watershed of the Badawat or the Mad River. And so that's another ongoing project. And finally, for resilient energy, to maintain power for critical systems all year and to build the workforce to operate those. The TERRAS project I mentioned, Tribal Energy Resilience and Sovereignty, is the current sort of organizing framework that we have. It's a regional intertribal consortium, and we've come together to build this together to seek funding, to build partnerships. We're certainly interested as well in state support that could be marshaled to help support this project. So it's definitely not a fully funded project yet, and we are actively looking for more support for this.
There's also the TCC, the Transformative Climate Communities Grant that we got through the SGC, which is a planning grant that we're working with the Karuk Tribe to work on community infrastructure needs and priorities in general. I'm not sure if you had that on your next slide.
No, I didn't.
Okay,
that was a good
perfect.
one. There's
Yeah.
so many things to say and so little time.
Yes, yeah.
But that was an important one to mention as well. So we're thankful for that. And I want to close out this portion of the presentation with more thank yous and recognition. Many team members contributed to, and I also want to emphasize learned from this project. I think we all learned a lot through it. So Yootva, thank you. We have the co-PIs you've heard from some of us so far, and lots of contributors. So Tanya, who you've heard from, is our esteemed project management professional, but also an overall research coordinator, community outreach, really has done a lot. Cassidy Barrientos is an air quality researcher, participating in the SAFE Symposium, is now at UC Berkeley, pursuing a PhD. Caris Geronimo, another SAFE Symposium helper, researcher extraordinaire at UC Davis pursuing a PhD. Nick Lamb, air quality researcher, previously at Cal Poly Humboldt, now at CSU East Bay. Malcolm Monsieur, they worked on Orleans community energy and air needs for their master's project. And I think, Malcolm, you're online now and at Pacific Northwest National Lab. So hi, Malcolm. Thank you. Olivia McShay as a master's student who worked on the symposium in energy system economics. Elizabeth Odell, air filtration system sizing. Webster Ross helped with communications. Heidi Morgana, who we've heard from, really stepped in and helped make the symposium work and has been a really great contributor from Blue Lake Rancheria. Moving forward, I think we just met you, Heidi, at the tail end of the SAFE project and have been really lucky to have been able to work with you since then. And then Frankie Tripp at the Department of Natural Resources in Orleans, helped with community needs and tribal research design. And Rosie Williams, again, also at KDNR, who brought a tribal science and community advisor perspective. Oh, and thank you, Deepti, for reminding me. Amin Yunus, who I left off here, but did, yes, contribute as well, who I think is now in the Public Advocate's Office at the CPUC.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I mentioned where people are now because I think it's a testament to the fact that when research like this gets funded, a big group of people gets to learn about best practices, to build best practices together, and then take those out into the world and to keep using them. These are folks who are moving on to very cool and next steps for people who have moved on from their jobs now, and we're really happy and proud to have worked with them.
Peter, I'm just gonna jump in for a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The following weren't part of the core expectations of the core tenets of the development of the SAFE Symposium, but I think it's worth mentioning that because of this research project and then the culminating activity of the SAFE Symposium, that there's been even more value for our region. So for example, I mentioned how BLR has distributed over 200 air quality monitors in our schools. This means that kindergartners through 12th graders are learning about data collection and analysis and are helping to inform the decisions for their classrooms. So this project is helping us kind of give opportunity to our next data scientists. And then also there were several participants who attended the SAFE Symposium who loved the interactive kind of facilitated aspect of it, and came back to many of us on this team and asked if we would help co-design a Humboldt aquaculture symposium, of which we did, and was also successful and was the first of its kind. And so I just wanted to mention that, there are many times when there are investments made in projects such as this and a culminating event that it's really hard to really quantify the ripple effect that work like this can lead to. So thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. And I think we've got about 30 more minutes and are very interested to hear from folks who have joined today about how you can see connections between the work we've done and your own work, or the policy development, the programs that you're developing, and any other questions that you have as well, of course. And I'll try and find an appropriate slide to leave it on. Maybe this one, which is our summary of pathways, or we could stop screen sharing too.
And while Peter does that, Nellie, if you want to stop the recording, we always like to have these conversations